Well, all right. How about that new intro? That was great. A nice, nice, cool graphics there. A hard stop. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. My name's TJ. I'll be your host for today's episode of Around the Blockchain. Welcome to BitBoy Crypto, home of the BitSquad. It is the greatest and largest crypto community in all the interwebs. We have a really good show lined up for you guys today. Some really good guests. Got a little bit of a throwback to what we just did last Friday. Some of the guests were so good, we had to have them back again. We've got a granddaughter of a Nathan's hot dog eating champion with us here today, CryptoWendyO. Just greatness runs in the family. We've got Arcane back, like I said, joining us here from last Friday, as well as Cryptostache, a little haggard, saving the voice a little bit, but, he was out entertaining everybody for 4th of July, playing a concert, but you know what, he decided he's going to get up and join us here today. And as always, let's go with Plan B. It's time for some Bitcoin. BitBoy up in the top left corner. We're going to be talking about exchanges running out of Bitcoin. We talked about a little bit this morning. We're going to be looking at the stock to flow model. Is it failing, or are we about to see a big rebound like we saw in 2013, as well as Vietnam, more on crypto, more nations moving into cryptocurrency. But before we get into any of that, we're going to do a quick market watch. As always, if you've seen the show before, you see those score boxes in the bottom right-hand corner. Make sure to drop a +1 in the chat if you like what you're hearing from any of the guests. I'll know to give them a point, a -1, and I'll take one away. Whoever has the most points at the end of the show will have 30 seconds to leave the audience with a parting message. Also, we've got the links to all these channels in the description below. So please, make sure you smash the like on this video. It helps us a ton. But as always, follow the link, go to their channel, subscribe, give them a like, because they all make really, really, really good content. So real quick, we'll get this market watch. Wendy, I know we had some action over the weekend about back where we were before the weekend with Bitcoin now. We did have a couple alts like synthetics and a few pump this weekend, or today actually, on some big news. But what are you seeing on the charts today?
To be honest, we're just kind of in the vibe and consolidate zone. We're not really doing anything too fancy. We've got a lot of pressure coming from our EMAs, essentially suppressing price, if you want to look at it that way. We had a hard retest of about 33.4, and it is kind of looking like we are going to break. So really the key area that I'm looking at is the 33.4. If we break, I would look for another retest of about 31.5, 31.6. If we sustain, I would look for a retest of about 35.6. Other than that, I don't really have anything else for you guys. Nothing too terribly exciting coming into the markets today, unfortunately.
Yeah, and well, one thing they told me I did have to say is I like turtles. So I had to say that in the show. But we're going to be looking at exchanges dropping, the lowest supply on exchanges we've seen in 6 months. I think we actually had a graph to pull up from Glassnode that showed some of the declines we're seeing from Bitcoin leaving exchanges. I think we've got 25,000 in just 2 weeks. We're seeing there are only 2.57 million Bitcoin left across all exchanges as of Sunday. So when we see this supply shock happen, in the past, we've seen it lead to some very big upward price movement. So do you think, Ben, this is more, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, but do you think this is the hedge funds and the whales accumulating? Is this a good sign to see an upward move in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, like we mentioned this morning, it seems like it's brewing right now. Things are brewing. If you look at these price points that people are buying in at, I mean, what's really the difference between 33.5 and 31.5? It's not that significant. I mean, on a large scale, obviously, if you bought 1 million Bitcoin, I mean, $2,000 is going to make a difference on the actual amount. But what you see with these institutions is they generally know that this is going to 6 figures and up. Eventually 7 figures for Bitcoin, most likely down the road, 5-10 years, somewhere around there. So in that case, if you look at the difference between 31,000 and 33,000, it's not that significant. What we're seeing consistently right now is the big money is putting money into the market. Now, they're not necessarily leveraging positions, so it's not leading to gigantic run-ups or anything like that right now. But this is like the calm before the storm. And by the middle of this month, we are going to be heading back up. I know a couple, like last week, Wendy talked about the grayscale event and how some people are expecting a sell-off. Today, we read an article that said that's actually bullish, and that might lead to more people having to get into the market due to that. And it could be, a bullish event instead of a bearish event. And so for me, I mean, like every day we're looking at stats that point us in the direction that this thing is not over. And that's why it makes sense. Like what Wendy said, like right now we are in vibe and consolidate. We're just trying to, any vibe and consolidate range, good accumulation points. And when the whales are accumulating, you should be taking a cue from them. Swim with the whales.
Yeah, that's a great point. We say it all the time, swim with the whales. And we looked at this other chart this morning that showed these entities with 1,000 or more Bitcoin, basically a wallet that has at least 1,000 Bitcoin in it. That's what becomes a whale wallet. They've been accumulating massively, especially this past few weekend. I think they accumulated about 60,000 in just the first couple of days of July, 60,000 Bitcoin, that is. And we see that spike. We were looking this morning, and we're pretty sure that's the largest one-day spike we've seen for Bitcoin accumulation in years. So, that tells a story for sure. Now, we haven't seen that bear out in the prices yet and in the price action. So, Stash, I wanted to ask you that. How long do you think it will take before we start to see the shortage of Bitcoin on exchanges, all these whales accumulating? How long before we see the effects of that reflected in the price?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually one of my favorite fundamental indicators. When you look at like kind of technical analysis versus fundamentals, this one is a really great one. So you can actually really understand, what one of those market trends, like what are people doing? Like you said, these whales are accumulating. It's a good time to also be thinking about that. I think this is actually this is a really good bullish sign to me. And I think that we're going to see this start to recover here pretty soon. I would say probably within the next couple of weeks. Is what I would see for something like this. In particular, accumulation of BTC is something that people are doing all the time. I know we always look at like, what are the institutions doing? What are the whales doing? But you guys out there should also be taking note and as individuals and investors also be doing that accumulation when we're hitting, we're in these like low consolidation ranges. I mean, 31 to 33K is a really great range to be accumulating Bitcoin, and institutions know that too. And so, like you guys say, I like that saying of swim with the whales, and I do it every day. I'm always accumulating Bitcoin. So I do think that's a really good bullish sign, and I do see that indicating that we're going to be turning around this kind of downtrend here, which I still think we're in a bull market. I think a lot of you guys would agree with me on that one too. I think we're still in a bull market. We've seen this downward trend, and it's gonna pull us back out here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we still firmly believe that, and we think July is going to be a really good time. Hopefully, is August as well. But Arcane Bear, I know you're heavy into the charts, heavy into the numbers. A lot of what we just showed, obviously, is regarding Bitcoin, but we're seeing very similar things with Ethereum as well. Ethereum supply shortage on exchanges, Ethereum whale wallets accumulating more. So in the next few months, assuming with all these same metrics, which are you more bullish on? Is it Ethereum or Bitcoin, in your opinion?
Well, right now,
in the short term.
Ethereum has more room for upside generally, I guess, is part of the conversation there. And it's got more use case on a day-over-day basis in terms of what it can do. Now, ultimately, I think Bitcoin makes a great collateral layer. So what I've got open is the Glassnode data. And I wanted to go over this just for another minute because I think it's really valuable insight, is that when the amount of supply goes up in the market, the volatility is usually to the downside. And when the supply leaves the market, the volatility is usually to the upside. What's really unique about the supply leaving the market is that the volatility increases. So it becomes that much easier for the price to go up as it declines. But as you can see on Glassnode here, we've been going down consistently maybe for the last week or two. And we're kind of meeting an area right now where we're almost at kind of back where we were at the beginning of January, effectively. It's kind of the start of the real noticeable bull market for everyone. And Ethereum just had that as well. If we look at Ethereum, the exchange balance percent stacked on Glassnode's data, we can see a huge chunk of it. I apologize here. Glassnode is not always the quickest, but there we go. Here we were up into June. We had a large amount of supply that came in the other day, and then we dropped significantly, and we're back at actually lows. I think when was the last time we saw a low for this with Ethereum? Yeah, we're actually at one of the lowest accounts of Ethereum on exchanges since 2018, effectively. So this means more volatility. Now, the direction can go both ways, and I wanted to make another subtle comparison here. I've got Bitcoin on the 3-day. In the pink down below, this is Bitcoin back between 2013 and 2017. And this, what I think it's most similar to is this drop from around 2,800 to around 1900, or you could even more charismatically say that it might be the second drop from around 4800 back down to 3400. Either way, the similarities of this market cycle are kind of one of my favorite things to look at, is that we see these repeating fractals inside of a market sentiment, and this looks to me, and I've stood by the sentiment that the bull market would likely continue, even if we had a quick dip down to the 20K area. It would get bought up so quickly. It would be very difficult unless you already had buys set and your exchange, through this lack of supply, was actually able to take care of that purchasing. So, I'm ultimately very bullish on the long-term macro perspective, even if we have, say, a temporary moment of downside in the near future.
Yeah, no, that was a really great breakdown, guys. And if you appreciate this information that Arcane Bear and all of us are bringing together, if you could just smash those likes. I know that Glassnode isn't cheap and not everybody can, afford it. So we bring this information up to you guys so you guys hopefully can better your lives and make good financial decisions. So if you like what we're doing here, if you could smash those likes, it makes a huge, huge impact for us. And like I said, go follow and subscribe to them as well, because I'm sure they would all appreciate it. So, Wendy, I wanted to come back to you with this one a little bit, as far as a couple of the things Arcane Bear mentioned was looking back at previous cycles and how we're at a 6-month low right now, the lowest we've been, for Bitcoin supply since January. So we all know what happened after January. I mean, price action went crazy. So do you think, are the charts starting to shape up and look similar to for a good run up like we did previous in January, in your opinion?
So as far as that goes, I like that we are kind of finding a bottom. That is important to notice, because we have really been stable between about, like, we had the low of about 29,316 with the swing wick low that occurred on the June 22nd. So it's nice because we're just kind of in this consolidation zone. But at the same time too, it is getting a little bit, can be a little bit scary too, because if in fact we do go into a bear market, a lot of people are going to be over leveraged on alts. People are not taking profit on alts, but it is kind of nice to see this consolidation range. It's kind of like the bull market took a pause, and it is important to listen to kind of what Arcane Bear said about the comparison to like 2013, 2014, and comparing the charts like that. So that is important to note, and I do like fractal-based technical analysis. I think it is important, and I also agree. I agree that if price does drop to about 20,000, we are going to see a lot of people step in and come and buy a lot, because there's always tweets on Twitter. People are talking about, oh my gosh, price will never go this low, X, Y, and Z. But in fact, the market really doesn't care what other people are saying, or doesn't care about absolutes. It's going to do what it's going to do. But at the same time, if price does drop there to about 20,000, even 25,000, people are going to start buying up, because it is a very, very low area. I hope that the bull market does resume, but I still am being pretty cautious and diligent in watching these areas.
Well, that's smart. And real quick, before we move on to the stock to flow section, we had a couple of questions in the Twitch chat, actually, for Arcane Bear, wondering about what plants you have behind you. Which plants are those?
I'm in a hotel right now, but oddly enough, these are really nice. Hold on, let me show you this, just because it's kind of a fun question. This is a two art piece segment, and there's one tree that's growing and in a desert, and there's a dead tree surrounded by green trees. I don't know. It's a really kind of nice art piece. I have no idea what kind of trees they are, yeah. But I think it's a nice art piece. Sorry.
No, it's cool. I mean, and they were asking in the chat, so we always love our viewers over on Twitch. We're just starting that and growing over there. So.
Before we move on too, I just real quick on top of that same note is, I think this trend of, exchanges not necessarily running out of Bitcoin, but being shorter and shorter on Bitcoin as we go over time, I think we're going to start seeing that being a more significant concern, where they're going to be, in the next 5 to 10 years, where they're going to be exchanges that simply just can't get their hands on enough Bitcoin. And so I think that's one of the really interesting things when you talk about like long-term predictions for these types of trends that kind of happen in a cyclic nature, right? So they were just talking about the 2013, 2014 versus now. I think we'll start to see less and less Bitcoin being on exchanges, because these big institutions, a lot of times they're holding and they're not selling for a very long time.
Yeah, no, that's a huge point. The short term can definitely send the price up just due to supply and demand, but the long term can be what could cause that super shock and maybe give us that blow off top we're looking for at the end of this year. I know we talked about that a lot Ben did, I know, in videos at the beginning of the year, looking at like what would really happen if we had like a gold rush on Bitcoin when all these nations are trying to stockpile. Everybody wants to hold some in their reserves. Like what happens when Coinbase can't get any, you know, or like all these OTC deals that are happening every day, they start drying up. So that could definitely happen, and that's part of what the stock to flow model is built on, which is supply and demand. So real quick, Ben, before we get into the details of this, you want to give just a quick rundown for the people at home that maybe aren't familiar of what the stock to flow model is?
Yeah, so basically it just has to do, it's a commodities chart is really what it is. I mean, you know, whether Bitcoin is a commodity, I guess it kind of falls in that category, but it's more for, you know, traditional precious metals and oil and things like that. And all it basically does is it maps out the way that the flow of the supply goes, because, right, like each commodity is going to have a certain way that it comes into the supply. Like with gold, you got to go mine it. And then there's kind of some controlling bodies that determine kind of the price of gold, actually, if you want to get into it. But so basically what Plan B did is he created he pulled over this commodities chart and made it work for Bitcoin. So I'll pull it up here so we can take a look at it.
Yeah, I think BJ's actually got it. He can pull it up.
Oh, BJ wants to pull it up. Okay, pull it up. There you go. Look at that. So basically what you're looking at here is the white line that runs through the middle. That's the expected average price of Bitcoin. And then when you look at the dots, the colored dots, that's going to actually be the actual price of Bitcoin. So as you can see, in each of the bull runs in 2009 or 2010, 2011, the end of that cycle, then the 13 and 14 bull run, and then the 17 to 18 bull run, and where we're at right now. So if you really actually look at it, where we're at now with the orange dots at the very end, we've now dropped well below the stock to flow forecast of where we should be. But if you look back at 2017, you can kind of see as where the red starts and it goes up to the yellow above the line there. You can see for that most of that bull run, we actually stayed under the average. And then at the very end, we popped off and went well above it. You go back to 2013, 2014, you can kind of see the same thing where, we had a large correction in the middle. We were over the average price. But right now, things are a little dicey because right now the stock to flow chart shows us we should be, let's see, where does it say we should be right now? Right now we should be at about $80,000. And obviously we're not even at half that. So it is ready for either, a parabolic run, which we think is coming, or either, throw the stock to flow chart out. Maybe it doesn't work for Bitcoin, but I tend to believe that it does. It's been, when we say it's the most accurate chart in history for Bitcoin, that's because when you zoom out and look at the whole thing and the way that Bitcoin maps out with the average prices, it's not accurate on a day-to-day level, but it always ends up coming true. And I always said that the reason the price of Bitcoin goes up is because of the halving, and that does not change. Eventually, the price will get so high that it'll be hard to move, but that halving and the fundamentals of scarcity and rarity of Bitcoin have not changed. But before you know it, in 2024, it's going to get cut in 50% again. And I think the stock to flow chart is going to end up being right, and it's extremely accurate, and it understands the real value of Bitcoin.
Yeah, and basically what that price projection is based on is the mining cycles, basically the supply and demand. So every 4 years, the supply of Bitcoin gets cut in half, and that's what this chart is based on, is that the supply gets cut, the demand will go up, and that's where these price predictions come from. And like you said, it's been the most accurate chart we've ever had in Bitcoin's history. But that was the question I want to throw to Arcane Bear, actually, is the stock to flow has been the most accurate chart in the entire history of Bitcoin. But is it due to break down eventually? Like, can it go on forever and be continually predicted forever, or do you think it's going to break down? Great question.
It's interesting, right? So Ben brought up some great points about scarcity and how we're using an older comparative model to commodities. I think the only thing I would include to that, I think what becomes relevant here is the cost of miners, the cost of mining equipment for them to move overseas in these massive capitulations. So I had just another chart I wanted to add to that original stock to flow, which is the stock to flow deflection. Yes. So this is another great chart that shows, back here on the left-hand side of the chart is 2017, and down where we are today is into 2021. So You see the 2017 bull market is all red, and pretty much everything after the $6,000 when we crossed that median line that Ben was showing on that white $100 trillion Plan B chart as a stock to flow model specifically. But stock to flow deflection is a bit more specific on how much it costs to mine. You got to buy new ASICs, you got to pay your CPA, you got to buy new Ethernet cables, you got to pay for electricity. So the stock to flow model shows, I think, a bit more accurately the cost of production. And right now, it's actually significantly cheaper to mine Bitcoin than it is to buy it, right? So when it gets into the red, the miners are almost always selling. And what's unique is that if we look again at the stock to flow deflection model, we look back through all of its history, so we see these really key capitulation moments where we're actually at a huge capitulation in terms of miners, right? So miners being forced out of China, we see that showing up on the total hash rate graph as well. We've dropped enormously in what it costs to produce Bitcoin. The difficulty level has dropped. So the only thing I would add again to what Ben was saying is that we're looking at the cost of producing Bitcoin as well, the same way you would to produce, say, an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver by having to pay employees to dig it out of the ground. The same kind of representation happens here. And almost any time that we're in the green, it's generally a good time to accumulate. And we see that across the board in fundamentals, like the Puel multiple, the market cap, thermal caps, all of those things are showing that we're in generally a low risk area right now for accumulation. So I think Ben covered most of that, but will it continue into the future? I think the big part of that question will come down to a few aspects of, the real crux I could put in the way is, say, what happens if someone figures out compact fusion and now electricity is basically free and the cost of electricity to mine Bitcoin goes to zero. You could see a fluctuation in the price at that point because of how easy it would be to actually mine it without a huge overhead. But that's a pretty far out guess to go, hey, we're waiting on fusion technology.
Exactly. Well, and like you said, there's been it has been the most accurate over time, and when all of the indicators are all saying the same thing, generally, like, it bodes well to look at the data. Now, we can't predict the future. All we can do is look at all the data we've had in the past and make our best assessment based on that information. So I think you did a great job breaking it down there, and Glassnode is definitely valuable. We look at their top and bottom indicators all the time, and right now, all of them are screaming buy. So that's what we're doing. But Stash, I wanted to come to you with this one on the high. The stock to flow model has a range of a minimum of 100,000 this year, as high as 288 within this cycle. So do you think 288,000 Bitcoin before the next halving is possible?
Before the next halving, yeah, 100%. I mean, we got a lot of time for that. 2024, I believe I don't know exactly what month, but that's always changing, based upon, mining and whatnot, ratios. But yeah, I definitely think we could see that before the next halving. Now, I don't know that we're going to see it maybe this year. I think we'll start to see us getting closer to that 100K target range by the end of the year. But I think that this is actually going to, in my opinion, I think this is going to end up being one of the longest bull run cycles we've ever had. And I said this on the show before, and we're starting to kind of see that because we've had this very long, accumulation range, and I think we're going to, we may go sideways a little bit longer, like I said, maybe another week or so. But that has really, I think, helped to kind of extend what we consider this bull run. So I do think that we'll see something closer to 100K by the end of the year. And then, but I don't know that it's going to be, I don't know if it's going to hit 100K this year. I'm not super confident. We'll see. I think it will extend into next year, and then like maybe January, February of next year, I think is when we might see it getting to that level. And kind of meeting some of those targets. And just to kind of put a little bit of point too on what Arcane Bear was saying about the fusion technology and new different ways to generate energy, there's actually a lot of really cool things out there. Not fusion, right? But some other things like nano diamond technology is really cool. If you guys have not looked into that, definitely go check that out. Nano diamond is using depleted nuclear waste to be able to power things indefinitely. So you can have a cell phone with a battery that lasts forever. You never need to charge it. because of this new technology. And then we just made, so there's been some pretty good breakthroughs in quantum technology actually recently as well, where they've been able to really get this down to a chip format. And so I think that could actually also increase some of these numbers. I mean, you think about a quantum computer mining Bitcoin in some sort of way. People always keep saying, "Oh, well, quantum computers will crush Bitcoin," and this what. But it actually may be something that is going to be, used for mining Bitcoin and increasing that overall production cycle, right? Being able to mine even more Bitcoin. So there's a lot of really cool technological advances out there that I think are really going to be changing the game here over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, love that. And then Economics of Geopolitics said that stash is slightly parabolic. So
every day, man, I'm a perma bull. What can I say? Every day.
you wear well. Wendy, I have a little bit of a psychology question for you, if you will. Arcane Bear was looking at all those top bottom indicators on Glassnode, and like you said, like generally when it's in the red, it's a good time to buy. Like when those indicators are show, and that's what we see time and time again, that's when the big money buys, that's when the whales and the institutions are accumulating more Bitcoin. However, inversely, every time we see it in the green, that's when most people that we talk to on a day-to-day basis are most excited. They're all out there buying Bitcoin. They're telling their friends they're buying Bitcoin. And then just yesterday or over the weekend, I was having conversations with people oh yeah, I do Bitcoin, like that's what I do for work. And, they're saying like, well, didn't that just go from 64 to 35? Like how, that's all they think about in times like this is how much it just dropped. So when we're all screaming now is the best time to buy, that's when the retail fear is at the height. So what's a good way to combat that for an individual, and as well as like if you are a big Bitcoin believer and you want to tell your friends about it, how do you approach that conversation?
First and foremost, Mr. I Like Turtles, I think that's what your last name is today. I want to actually thank you for not asking me a very tech-heavy question, because I was getting a little bit nervous to kind of follow BitBoy and Stash and Arcane Bear, because I had no idea what they're talking about when it comes to some of that really, really tech-heavy stuff. And if you're watching this, guys, and you didn't understand what they were talking about this different kind of energy usage for mining, that's okay. You don't have to. You don't have to be the most tech-savvy person in the world to participate in Bitcoin and crypto. That's okay. We're all different. We're all unique, and we're all good at different things. But back to talking about the psychology of the market. So generally people want to buy when there's a lot of hype, when there's a lot of FOMO, and when things are getting hyped up. Like generally you always want to buy something when it's the most popular, because you feel kind of like you're missing out. And that's normal. We're all human. That's the way things work. But when we're trying to talk to somebody about Bitcoin isn't about the hype. It's not about the FOMO. It's truly a tool that I do believe can help change the quality of life for many, many people, different people from all different types of background. So when you want to talk to friends and family members and kind of get them excited about Bitcoin, first you should ask them what they do for work, make sure you know a little bit about them, and figure out what part of Bitcoin can help improve their quality of life, and talk to them about those topics. You have to talk to somebody about things that it's going to make it to where it's going to resonate with them. Because when you start like if somebody's very passionate about their family and you talk to them about how Bitcoin can improve the quality of lives for themselves and their family, maybe with financial freedom, or basically maybe when it comes to personal finance, you want to focus on those topics. You want to make it relatable, because if you're just like talking like, oh my God, this thing's going to go to the moon, you're going to get rich. If you're talking to somebody who's not necessarily interested in that aspect, you're going to lose the argument and you're not going to be able to be persuasive. So as far as like the best practices, make sure it resonates, make sure your argument resonates, and don't do it out of being selfish. Do it because you actually do care about improving their quality of life. And then as far as the time to buy, I don't think there's really a bad time to buy Bitcoin. If you're somebody that's going to dollar cost average in, just make sure you're using disposable income. Maybe buy $25 a week or $5 a week, or stack sats. And, they've got different apps that allow you to stack sats for free, but there's not necessarily a bad time. And the thing is too, you guys, just because you have an extra $1,000 of disposable income, you don't have to buy it all right now. You don't have to buy today. You can take that stack and you can go ahead and you can set limit orders, or you can go ahead and buy, maybe you're going to buy this week, maybe next month, maybe in 2 months from now. It doesn't matter when you buy it. Buy it whenever it resonates with you, when you feel comfortable, or just go ahead and set limit orders or have an app do it automatically for you. That's just my personal opinion.
No, that's a great opinion, and that's great advice for most people out there. That's actually the same advice I gave the person I was talking to over the weekend. So everybody wants to do everything all at once for whatever reason that is, but just setting a set schedule and being disciplined with it pays off over time. So and you'll hear that through most crypto conversations. Like zoom out, be steady, be consistent. Don't try to get rich fast. I mean, you can get rich faster with cryptocurrency than you can with any other asset that's ever existed, but that get rich quick mentality can still come back to get you no matter what you're trying to do. So do your own research. Don't look for shortcuts, and listen to what Wendy just said. That was great advice.
DCA, man,
think of it as like a 401k. Like every week, if those of you that are working full-time jobs that have companies like that match or do whatever, you're essentially dollar cost averaging into your 401k or IRA or whatever it is. So just think of it like that. Just think of Bitcoin as a retirement fund, and just dollar cost average, and don't worry about when you're buying into it. You do that the same with your 401k. So why not do it with Bitcoin?
Exactly that, and that's exactly what I do.
Can I add something to this fear psychological process?
Yes.
So one of the most fascinating parts for me about when everyone started to lock down the world and we went into this kind of new craze of learning what it's like to deal with, one of the things I found fascinating was going back and doing retrospective studies on some of the older assets, right? So right now you should be able to see the S&P 500. Here is the 2001 crash when we hit the bottom of a trading range. Here's the 2008 financial crash where we hit the bottom of the trading range. And the other circle over here was March 11th when the WHO just told everyone we should lock down. And what's interesting, and this is, Wendy, you're making this point too very well, is that people usually buy into the hype when you can almost never look at a chart and focus solely on when there's fear. Like pretty much every day after September 11th back here in 2001, the market went down. Every day after they started to realize that there was problems with Lehman Brothers and the housing market, we went down. And these started to be your best points of entry effectively. And March 11th here also represented that. So there's this really old quote by Baron von Rothschild that says, buy when there's blood in the streets. And all three of these down cycles that we can see here were very noticeable in terms of basically human emotion to some degree or another. So you can often get away from not like, you don't even necessarily need to look at a chart. You can feel the palpable fear that's taking place in these markets sometimes. And that's when you like double down. But for every other time, Wendy's nailed it on the head, which is that you just find a point in the month that fits your revenue generation with your company or your trust or your personal self, and you make investments into the technology I like technology in general, but Bitcoin, Ethereum, you just find that monthly execution and you execute without thinking. And there are a bunch of PDFs by Schwab and Fidelity that talk about how this is like the key investment strategy, and how the people that don't focus on the price as much end up focusing more on the value of what they're investing in instead, and long term end up doing much, much better.
Yeah, no, that's great. And
that quote too, you're actually missing a part of that, right? So it's buy when there's blood in the streets, even if the blood is your own. And that's actually, I feel like, a pretty important thing to remember on that one too, because a lot of people quote just that first part, but that second part is actually pretty important, because that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily always want to do.
Well, and especially in crypto, anytime there's blood in the streets, we all know a little bit of it's going to be ours. So, but it is tough. I was very fortunate to be in that kind of situation you referenced, Arcane Bear, where it was like you've been dollar cost averaging into this asset that you believe in, and then right when that moment hit where it seemed like there was a big dip, for me it was in March of 2020. I had just happened to sell my house and had some extra stuff, and it's like this is the time. So I went all in on something I really believed in and got as much as I could, and was happy that I did. But it took the years of dedication and study and all that stuff to really have that conviction to pull that trigger when it came. So it's all a journey. I think we were talking, Ben and I were talking about that over the weekend, of how much all of this stuff is a journey, and gaining experience as you go along. So speaking of the crypto journey, we've got more developments in nations with crypto, where we've got Vietnam moving more towards crypto. Now, in the past, they've been very anti-cryptocurrency, where their central banks have pretty much shut it down, ignored it, no regulation. Now, as of yesterday, their prime minister is calling for CBDCs. They actually had a story last year where they were putting together a school to try to train and start bringing people up in their economy to understand cryptocurrencies. So we've seen a lot of adoption in Central America. We've even seen some in Africa. We haven't really had any major, as far as for CBDCs, underdeveloped nations in Asia kind of bringing this in as a potential. So this is a much larger GDP, much larger economy, much more purchasing power for a nation than somewhere like El Salvador. So, Ben, do you think we could start to see Vietnam as the gateway into Asia for CBDCs and cryptocurrencies to really start to take hold? Because we know they're very tech-friendly there.
Well, good morning, Vietnam.
There it is.
Welcome to crypto.
Yeah.
Well, something that's interesting is we actually did we did a sponsored video with a Vietnamese project a while back, and we also, I'd also covered this project back before. A project to watch is Cardia Chain. That's with a K, K-A-R-D-I-A chain. It's the first interoperable blockchain in Vietnam. And so can they be the doorway, the pathway? I mean, I think that's already, done sailed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in Singapore. There's a lot of stuff in Indonesia. There's a lot of stuff in China, obviously, which is kind of walled off, no pun intended, digitally walled off anyways. Obviously, Japan, Korea, a lot going on there. So I'm not looking at Vietnam to be like a major player, but I mean, kind of like we were talking about this morning with Wyoming. Wyoming is a major player in blockchain here in the United States, even though they're not very populated, and there's not like it's where people want to go when they want to get away from things. That's a good way to think of Wyoming. Vietnam obviously is highly populated, but when you compare it to the other kind of tech behemoths that are around there, I don't know where Vietnam ranks. However, the fact is there is a huge population there. You do look at, Cardia Chain is trying to be kind of an Ethereum killer almost, if you will. I mean, it's a real played out term. And you start to see how that could be a project to keep your eye on. It's up. Let's see, what's it up today? I think it's up about 1.5% today. So it hasn't had a really big pump. Right now it's sitting at about 4 cents. Its all-time high was about 15 cents back on April 13th. So could be a good opportunity, and kind of what we see when we have these countries that kind of break crypto, I guess, break towards crypto. There's a lot of advantages of looking at projects that are based there. I can't remember the big partner they have there. It's a big, I think, sports television channel in Vietnam that they're partnered with. Maybe it's in the ecosystem here. I can't really see it. There's also a project we're invested in called My DeFi Pet that's built on Cardia Chain. So a lot of interesting stuff to check out there. When I heard the Vietnam news today, that's where my brain went. Was what's that Vietnamese project? Cardia Chain. Let's check that out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, a lot of people were making a big deal about how much more purchasing power Vietnam has versus El Salvador. But we're talking CBDCs. We're not talking Bitcoin as their currency. So, Stash, is there anything that gets people all that excited about CBDCs anymore, or is this just going to be par for the course? We're going to hear everybody's coming out with CBDCs, and it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah, I think this is not really. I mean, I wouldn't consider this big news in particular, because Vietnam is still pretty much 100% against Bitcoin and other cryptos. They want to use blockchain technology for different applications, and the CBDC is just one of those. So they're really pushing in multiple directions. I mean, they're like education. They already have they're a lot of their university diplomas and things like that are on the blockchain. So they're trying to use blockchain technology and as a benefit for their country, but they're not really trying to incorporate Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. And most of those things are still not necessarily legal to be traded in their country. So I don't think it's a bullish news for Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. I think that, like a lot of other governments around the globe, they're seeing this push towards having a CBDC, something they can control. Once again, it comes back down to control. And that's exactly what these central bank digital currencies are designed to do. Is they start to see this trend where people are getting on board more and more, and they're like, hey, the control's slipping through our fingers. What do we do? Oh, well, let's create our own cryptocurrency and call it something special and different. That way we can get everyone on board, and we can still control them, and we're going to force it upon them at some point, and they'll have absolutely no choice. So the bulk of people in Vietnam will not have been able to purchase Bitcoin, something they can hedge against for inflation, for store of value over time, and then they'll be forced to this CBDC here at some point in the future.
Yeah, that does seem like it could be a pretty plausible scenario, that it is a lot about control, especially with, like you mentioned, them getting it very integrated through their schooling
100%.
system and their education and their identity, so they can kind of keep track of all this kind of stuff as time goes on. But Wendy, I'm going to ask kind of a not a controversial question, but one that might be kind of counter to a lot of the crypto mindset and ideals, is something when you're looking at a nation like this and the country's plan is to use blockchain technology and their plan is to try to take more control because they feel like it's going to better the citizens. Is there a scenario where using CBDCs, using blockchain technology, no, it's not decentralized, no, it doesn't give the most freedom, but maybe some of these people didn't have the most freedom to begin with, but it could give them a better quality of life? Is that a scenario you can see happening, or what's your thoughts on a scenario like that?
I love that you asked me this question, and 100%. So when we do get a CBDC that is integrated globally, because there will be one in like every single country, that's bound to happen. That's fine. And basically what's going to happen is they're going to go ahead and track their residents, what they're doing. And it's inevitable, it's coming. But one industry I will say that I can say with 100% confidence that will help improve the quality of life with blockchain technology, and kind of what it's going to do is really centralize the whole entire industry, is actually healthcare. And I worked in healthcare for 7 years. I worked in HIV, AIDS, infectious disease, and my patients I became friends with a lot of them. I managed 200 to 300 patients per month. And because everything was so decentralized in healthcare, there was not one database that I can look in to figure out, okay, is this person actually diagnosed? What's this person's regimen? What are their other ailments? What is their insurance? What is their, just different information about them. Blockchain technology has a capability to do that for people as a whole, like globally, if that's what, the nations decided to do. And it would actually, even there are going to be people that disagree with me about this, but realistically, for a healthcare worker to be able to verify a patient's status, their medical history, prescriptions, all different information about them with a click of a button, that is going to be revolutionary. It's going to be life-changing, and we would be able to provide better care to our patients. And when we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about things that are very, very time sensitive, especially people that have to take things daily for the rest of their lives, or people that have very critical things going on with them. So I do think that it is a very sensitive argument. There's privacy involved. There's a whole lot of things. I can do a whole show. I can probably debate this for like weeks on end. But at the same time too, I just understand not being able to service my clients and give them the care that they needed because I couldn't get into a silly database. And because of laws and regulations, I couldn't just give them medication that I knew that they needed because of a database.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And like you said, there's a lot of great things that crypto blockchain decentralization can provide, but there also could be a long ways out from a practical application standpoint. So looking at how we solve problems, decentralization long-term, especially when it comes to money and finance, I believe is definitely the way to go, but decentralization isn't the right answer for all situations. But that being said, I do kind of want to hear, Arcane Bear, if you've got a counterpoint to that of if a nation was to give away its identity and its medical records and to start putting all of this stuff on a blockchain, and it might seem to create a better quality of life in the short term, what's the kind of scary side to that if you play that out long term? I think I know where you're going to land on this because you and I seem to be pretty similar in a lot of this stuff. But what's kind of the counterpoint to what Wendy just said? Because I agree with what Wendy said, but there's definitely two sides to that coin.
Well, just to support Wendy's comment there before I go off on my tangent, is that there is a fair amount of privacy and security that can be added to the patient's records, allow it to be more easily accessible. And I think in general, the blockchain actually probably solves a few things, or can help solve a few things that we've had problems with in finding consensus. Not that consensus is always a valuable idea. We thought the world was flat, and that was the consensus for a long time. It's not a great debate point. But what to go back to the beginning, when we're looking at central bank digital currencies, my first thought is kind of a gut wrench. I was really interested in Bitcoin because it was the first non-government money that I had seen where we could choose based off our own understanding of what the technology represented. And that was its huge selling point for me. They had consistently debased the money. They had been helping their friends along the way while doing that. And they had lined the pockets of the interests that were there to support them in the government. It's basically, they've created a level of fascism. Now, the downside is exactly what you brought up, TJ, is that there's, how much control does the government potentially have over the digital identity, the digital data, or the digital bank system that each individual might have? If they can just turn you off, that's a very dystopian feeling, I think, that would come across the table very quickly. On the other hand, what central bank digital currencies could bring to our ecosystem that might be valuable is is actually more flow. This technology being open source, I wouldn't be surprised if someone could take their central bank digital currency, trade it for Bitcoin on an automated market maker, and you would see these kind of what they would probably call black market markets, or black market makers, I don't know, being created where people could trade these fiat tokens for something actually more valuable in the digital asset world. Now, one of the conversations I've been kind of internally struggling and meditating on is just the deflationary force of technology itself. So that these central bank digital currencies may actually be positive for our ecosystem because it may provide another on-ramp for someone in Vietnam to trade their, I don't know what their currency is called, into a Bitcoin or an Ethereum. So it may be a net positive, but I'm definitely with you that the technology has the potential to become tyrannical if used improperly, where you do not have control over the data that you have anymore. So that would be my big worry, but that's why we're here. I think that's why we all show up, is hopefully that if we can, each have a voice at the table, that hopefully we don't end up in that dystopian future.
Yeah. Well, and did you have something you want to jump in there with, Ben?
Yeah, I did. It's the Vietnamese dong.
Oh yeah, that's right. That is their word.
We're going to get to that dystopian future. I know you guys think that it's like it's just one of those plots, but I honestly think that that's where we're heading. It's sad to say that and to think that, but I think that we're going to be heading towards the kind of this dystopian future where there's more and more control, and some of these things that we thought were going to allow us to have a little bit more freedom are going to be turned against us at a certain point. And I think CBDCs are one of those. That's what start to do it, because where you're saying, oh, well, it could be trade, maybe it's going to help the market in general because it could be traded for Bitcoin. I think that's one of the things that they're definitely not going to allow to happen. And one of the things they're trying to mitigate by having these currencies that they have full control over, that are blockchain based. And so, moving things like our identity and other things into the blockchain, it will definitely help with efficiency, but it's also going to give them a lot more tools for control over us in the long term as well. And I don't see it slowing down. You see places like China where they're doing this in very advanced ways. Those things are going to start to come to more Western nations and other places where we feel like democracy reigns. But when they have that big data on us, there's not really much we can do, and we give away that. And it's funny, right now we give that away a lot. You guys have an Amazon Echo in your house or one of those spy devices, things like that. Man, people don't realize how much data you guys are giving away on a daily basis, and that is the real gold when it comes to long-term, control over a populace.
Yeah, well, and like you said, the control is definitely a big factor, but kind of bringing it up back to what Arcane Bear, and CBDC is definitely a slippery slope. I mean, I can hear what he's saying. It could potentially become a new on-ramp because people can see it against other currencies and maybe see, oh, hey, this one's going down faster than that one's going down. I might switch some of this over here. I do agree with you, Stash, though. They're not going to make that easy for people, though. They're going to want to keep people in there.
They're already not doing it for Bitcoin and everything you have. Right. The things were available to us right now. I mean, look at us here in the United States. We get so little access to a lot of the rest of the world of cryptocurrency because of our regulations. Do you think that's really going to get better in the short term? I mean, I don't. It's unfortunate. I mean, I'm still going to fight for it, man. I'm not going to lie. I'm still going to be out there fighting the trenches for it. But, in the short term, I don't know that that's going to be the case.
Well, like you said, it feels, and we've talked about it on the show before, it does feel somewhat inevitable that we are on that track. But we are the ones here fighting to stop it because we don't want to end up on that track. We want to have freedom. We want to have free choice, and we want to have options. And I think that was the beautiful thing that Arcane Bear said earlier about Bitcoin is for the first time ever, we had a choice. We had an option to choose a form of money that wasn't government issued, and we could exit the system. And we're slowly starting to see the effects of that playing out over time. And as long as we have a choice, we have a chance. But if they take that choice away, it's going to be tough. So that's what we keep fighting for, keep fighting to have a choice. And, hopefully this all plays out in the world. We'll end up better, and we don't end up in that dystopian future that you guys were just referencing. And I truly believe we can fight it, and we won't end up that way. And that's why we get up and do this channel every single day.
Man. That's why we're here. I'm right there with you. Like, we're here because of that. I do this as something in that same realm. I fighting, man, fighting together. Exactly. 1-2 punch, man. It's that's what we're doing here around the blockchain, and all of us individually. because I truly believe, just like Arcane Bear does, just like CryptoWendyO does, and just like Ben and TJ and the whole crew, we believe in this alternative system, that it is going to take us into the future. We cannot let people manipulate it to a point where it doesn't do what it was intended to do, really, and or what we've even given it the purpose to do here, which is to give us an option.
There you go. Well, that's all we have time for today, guys. Really good show. Really appreciate all the guests joining us. It looks like we've got Arcane Bear with the top score today. He was bringing the heat. You got 30 seconds. Take it away. Give your audience your parting message.
Okay, boom. This is one of my favorite ones. So some of you will recognize this. The disease of the early investor comes from over-emotional trading and lack of understanding. So one of the best ways to cure that is by doing your homework. If you'd like to, you can follow us at Arcane Bear. I'm a huge fan. I like supporting this voice in this conversation. Just for that reason, you can follow us on YouTube. Our Twitter is down below. A big shout out to CryptoWendy, Cryptostache, as I go off into infinity there for a second. Ben and TJ, it's always a pleasure to chat with you guys. So thank you for inviting me back to continue these conversations.
Yeah, man, thanks for joining us. It's always fun having you here. Like I said, that's all we have time for today. We really appreciate all you guys watching the show. If you could, smash the likes and leave a comment on questions and guests you'd like to see in the future. We'd really appreciate it. That's all we got. We're out.